So we're tackling the Transformer Slag podcast Patreon listener questions this week, and we got, again, yet another one we're going to jump into. A lot of good discussions here we have, as well as good information for us toy collectors that are sometimes new to the hobby and need to know how things go down and how to be smart about it. So if you want to be part of the Transformer Slag podcast Patreon and help support the podcast, let us know we're doing a half-decent job keeping you educated and informed in your hobby in the Transformer world. Again, patreon.com/Protoman, or check the pinned comment or in the video description below. What does it get you? It gets your name in the end credit scroll, gets you access to the exclusive Discord where we have all kinds of cool stuff there. You've heard me talk about this already this week. I'm not going to bore you with it again, but if you want to support us, again, patreon.com/Protoman. And we got a Patreon listener question this week, and it's a really good one. It'd be really helpful for a lot of fans. And it comes from Tristan Lightyear, one of our patrons. And he wants to know, since you have deep knowledge about plastics within toys, do you have any recommendations on how to get rid of the smell of cigarette smoke out of my Transformer toys? Also, does weed, aka marijuana, have the same kind of effect? Well, thank you, Tristan, for the question. Man, this is one that really hits close to home in a lot of ways, because me and my father are both collectors. My father is a toy collector also. He also has vinyl records. People have probably seen the YouTube videos online of his crazy collection. And me and my father, we don't smoke. We're not into it. It's not our thing. But my mother, aka my father's, wife, is quite the smoker. And because my father was adamant that he didn't want his stuff getting damaged, my mother was relegated to one room in the house to enjoy her cigarettes. And we grew up hating the smell and everything that was cigarettes. And to this day, I hate cigarettes. I hate them. They're pointless. They're stupid. They're bad for your health. But I'm not here to talk about that, really. I'm here to talk about getting rid of that stuff out of your toys. So growing up, we learned, first of all, that despite the fact that it could be in the household, you got to really isolate it to a room. So first of all, if you are a cigarette smoker, don't do it around your collection. And I'll tell you a whole bunch of personal stories, both from the tobacco side of it and the weed side of it, and how does it affect your toys. And I've seen examples of it, because years later, buying collections from people, not just Transformers, but other toy collections and video games and comic books, and seeing how bad some of the damage was, specifically because of both cigarette smoke and marijuana smoke, and being surprised how we dodged a bullet living with my parents, and just how isolating the cigarette smoking to one room or outside the house really made all the difference. It really did. Where, keep that stuff away from your toy room, your comic book room, it's just not good. It gets into clothing, it gets into furniture, it gets into everything. Filthy habit, to quote James Bond, filthy habit. So let's jump into it. Number one, he asks, is weed the same thing? While the damage that happens to the figurines it has the exact same result with marijuana as to tobacco cigarette, because it's the smoke aspect of it that causes the physical damage. The smell part of it that also people are concerned about is different between the two. Cigarette smoke just stays forever. It just stays forever, and it is really strong, and you could really tell. Marijuana smoke, I've bought in collections from marijuana smokers. I find that the only time you really notice it is when you isolate the toy and then you approach the toy in that isolation. Give you a case in point. Being displayed in glass cases. Say a DTOF cabinet. You open up a DTOF that's had marijuana smoked cigarette, marijuana figures around it, it's going to hit you right away. It has a unique smell, and you'll notice right away. Same thing when they're kept in Ziploc bags. Second you open that Ziploc bag, it'll hit you. But I find that it's not as noticeable when it's out in an aerated environment, where cigarette smoked toys, it is very noticeable. There's just something strong about it. Now, the physical damage does happen from both marijuana and tobacco smoke. It's going to yellow your figures. It's going to get into the plastic. What happens on a deeper level is ABS plastic and POM plastic absorbs that cigarette smoke, the smoke, or like cigarette or marijuana smoke. It's going to absorb it. And then that yellowing light sensitivity that we see with yellowing toys happens also with this, because the smoke almost acts like a humidity. It gets into the pores of the ABS plastic or the POM plastic and causes a form of yellowing. And I swear I've posted on Twitter some great examples of that, where I had my childhood Iceman figure from X-Men, the Toy Biz one, and then I had one from a cigarette smoker. And again, I lived with my mom, who was a hardcore cigarette smoker, but she was in the other room all the time, didn't get affected by it. But this cigarette smoking guy, he just smoked in front of all his stuff. And you could see how yellow it was. It was crazy how badly affected it. And you couldn't fix it because the Iceman figure wasn't ABS. It wasn't POM. It was PVC. The Iceman figure had a gimmick where you could it was made of a softer PVC plastic, and you could put it in the fridge and stuff, and you could get ice on it and everything. It was an old Toy Biz toy. And the PVC plastic stuff is a lot more difficult. And that's the softer plastics. That's like softer points on figures that are a little more bendable. A majority of, let's say, Marvel Legends stuff and the Star Wars Black Series stuff use a lot more PVCs. Usually the bodies are ABS. Sometimes the joints are POM, but a lot of the arms and legs and stuff, that's PVC accessories. So it's something where you're going to have a more difficult time removing it. Now, how do you remove that smell? So there's a few options you have for you. And I'm going to use Transformers, but I'm also use other toy lines too, so it could be applied to everything here. If you have a toy that has stuff that doesn't have stickers, that doesn't have soft goods, that doesn't have like fragile soft paint points, like the paint could easily be removed, and it doesn't have die cast or metal or pins or screws, I would suggest washing the toys. I bought a wrestling figure collection, modern wrestling figure collection, Attitude Era and above, for people who know what I'm talking about. And all of it came from a cigarette smoker. Guy loved cigarettes, and his roommate loved marijuana. It was this salad of smells coming from these figures, easily like 50 of them. I have like an industrial sink in my basement that's next to my washer and dryer, and I just filled that thing to the top with soap and water, and really good detergent, soap and water, and just scrubbed each one of those really deeply. And I remember when I drained all the water afterwards, it was like disgusting what came off of it. And you don't see it with the naked eye, but then you see how the water just changed into like a yellowish color because of how nasty it was. And the figures didn't get damaged because they have a stronger paint on it. There is no die cast with those. There was no soft goods, and there was no fragile paint points. So we were able to get away with that. Now with Transformers, it really depends on what you're trying to fix here. Because if you have like vintage G1 with die cast and stuff like that, it's going to be a lot more difficult between the fragile stickers on it, between all that. So then you fall more into what's called the dryer sheet method. And even that one isn't perfect, but it's probably the best that you could do, which is you get a giant, and I say get a giant Ziploc bag, and I'll explain why the giant one is more important than getting like a small Ziploc bag. Go to the dollar store or whatever, get one of those huge Ziploc bags and get a bunch of those dryer sheets. And what you do is you want to put the figures in it. Usually I put them one at a time because you want to have, people tend to not tell this piece of information. You don't want the dryer sheet to be touching the figure in the bag, because those dryer sheets, they sometimes have oils on them, they have perfumes, and sometimes that stuff could transfer onto the figure and damage it. It could cause all kinds of other side effects that could damage the plastic and everything and cause discoloring and everything. So you want to kind of have the figure separated. So that's why you get a large dryer sheet. That way there's a distance between them. But when you have the figure and the dryer sheet in the bag, ziplock that bag very tight, make sure it's sealed, and leave it for like a couple of days. I usually say leave it for like a week or two. Keep it out of sunlight. Just keep it alone with it, but make sure the figure isn't touching it. And usually what will happen is the cigarette smoke doesn't leave the figure, but the dryer sheet kind of masks the smell of the cigarette smoke. It does it in a way that it somehow is able to cover it, and this counts for marijuana also. It kind of covers it and just makes it not as noticeable. But then the thing is, and it's not foolproof, and that's why it's not the best way, but it's sadly one of the few that we have, is now it just smells like whatever that dryer sheet is that you bought. So it kind of, and again, it works with soft goods too. If you have, this doesn't really apply to Transformers, but if you have some, figures that have like, capes or stuff like that, again, put the capes in there, put the dryer sheets, and it's going to do its thing. The only other solution that I could suggest, and I've seen this with dolls specifically, I've encountered this with certain dolls, is if the doll's hair reeks of that stuff. What you could do is if you have somewhere that's a nice outdoor area, fresh air outdoor area that isn't really, prone to the elements, let's say you have like a solarium or something, if you have something that's nice and aired out and like that, if you could leave it out there for an extended period of time, again, try to shield it from the sun hitting it and stuff because that'll damage the figure in other ways. That sometimes helps, but not always. I'm reminded of, again, it was bought a Gem doll collection, Gem and the Holograms, and one of the doll's hair just, oh God, it smelled like, I don't even want to say, it was really bad, really, really bad. And we put that doll out and left it for like, no joke, we probably like left it out there for 2 weeks. And then we came back to it, it all of a sudden smelled a lot better, so God knows what was in there, but it was just, oof. Someone used it to wipe themselves. Who knows? It was really bad. At the end of the day, that's why I started at the beginning of this saying it's disgusting. Try to just avoid it completely, guys. It's just, there is no clear solution to it because it causes yellowing, it causes damage, it gets into the plastic. I've encountered toys that sometimes there is no way saving them. There just isn't a way to fix the problem. I bought a Cops collection, Fighting Crime in a Future Time. Anyone remembers those? Bought it from a weed smoker, and no washing, nothing could be done to help it. It was in there so bad between the PVC of the figures, the ABS of the figures, the fact that they have O-rings, and those O-rings had to be replaced because forget it with those got all like crusted and everything. And then the accessories, and then all the figures that had white plastic on them, those ones started to yellow, like Big Boss and Berserko, and it was just shit. It was just not good. It really wasn't. And it was just like, to me, it's like, that's why like when you buy on eBay, the emphasis on it comes from a smoke-free home is so important. Because I had pets. I had dogs, I had cats, I had budgies, I had turtles, I had all kinds of pets. Never had a problem. There wasn't no smoke transfer, like smell transfer with that kind of stuff. Granted, pets are, people that say pets are a problem are crazy. It's not. It's the smoke. Smoke, it gets up in the air. It gets into the atmosphere. It gets into plastics. It gets into things. It's really tough to fix it. It really is. Again, there's been Transformer toys that I've encountered that there's just like nothing you could do for them. Because they either have die cast or they have metal screws or you could just physically see the damage on it, that there's just nothing that you could do. There really isn't. Pretender shells where they have this ABS body, but they have these PVC arms. And the PVC arms, man, if there is a smoker who owned one of those Pretender shells, you might as well just give up on the figure. There's no way that you could wash them because the paint is going to get damaged. You could try to be careful, but you really got to scrub it. The dryer sheet thing, I just feel it's not going to work with some really soft PVC that's been absorbed over 30 years of cigarette smoking. Like at that point, you just look at that landmine Pretender shell figure and go, see ya, buddy. Good luck. And it's just, there's certain ones, it's really bad. So those are some of the solutions. But unfortunately, there is no perfect solution outside of what I said with the wrestling figures. You got to wash them. If you could find some kind of situation where you could really scrub them down, that's going to solve the problem. But anything that isn't as evasive and getting in there, unfortunately, that's not the case. And Transformer toys, we got paint, we got die cast, we got pins, we got screws. There's a lot of things where you can't put those guys submerged in water because a lot of things are going to get damaged or they're going to get rusted. And then you end up with other problems. You don't want rusted screws. Rusted screws create oxidation. Oxidation then creates rust particles, which then damage the plastic around those rust particles. And then you get all kinds of other problems. It's nuts. It's nuts. But at the end of the day, the thing is, if you are a smoker of both the tobacco or the Mary Jane aspect of it, keep that away from your collection. Go outside, smoke it out there. If you can't, well, there's not much I could help you with. If you're someone who's buying a collection from a smoker, buyer beware. I have seen many times, shout out to Gray of TFCon staff. Gray, I remember he used to buy toys from TFCon, and they would always be in Ziploc baggies, and before he would buy them, he would open up the bags and smell them, and he was the only person I'd ever see do that. But I was like, you know what, he's smart, because he knows that, like, a lot of these guys, man, they light up, so it's something where, you have to also just be wary of that. You really do, because it's something that you might not even notice it when you're in a big convention and it's a big airy environment or a big, like convention hall or something. But then you get home and you put it in your display or you put it in your detolf, and then you keep it closed and you come back to it, all of a sudden it hits you. And you go, oh man, that does not smell good. And that, again, I've experienced it. I've seen it hundreds of times, personal experience, and it sucks. So just be wary of that. Again, dryer sheet method, washing them, putting them out to air them out. Again, try to avoid, sunlight and stuff like that too. But there's really not much else outside of that, unfortunately. It's unfortunate, but it's almost like yellowing damage, where you could reverse it to a degree with chemicals and sunlight, but there's only so much that you could do within the limitations once you get into paint and other kind of fragile things. Let me know what you think otherwise, guys. If you guys have some kind of method that I'm missing, I mean, this comes from decades of having to deal with this stuff and everything from personal experience. But I mean, if there is some kind of new magical method, sure, hey, go for it. But at the end of the day, you got the figures got to go for a swim. They got to take a fig bath. I think who said that? Who said the fig bath? Was that what's his name there? The wrestler who has a action figure podcast. I forget his name. But yeah, it's like it's the way that I see it. That's the best way to go about it. So again, hope that helps you, Tristan Lightyear. Again, it's tough. It's tough. Anyways, guys, if you want to be like Tristan Lightyear and be part of the Transformers Flag podcast Patreon and help support the podcast, I know we're doing a half decent job. Again, patreon.com/Protoman. Or check the pinned comment or the description below. And I hope you learned something today. Take care, everybody.